Hello guys and gals, and welcome to another episode of Skills and Abilities. So today we're going to be going over another shout. Let's see if we can clear out all the shouts, the Warcry tree. This one is called Taunt. A long time ago I actually built a Taunt Barbarian. The whole Barbarian was based off of Taunt. It was silly. And it worked kind of cool actually. This particular ability is a synergy for Frenzy, though, so it does give a very nice 8% damage per level on Frenzy, which goes up to obviously 20 times 8. And it can be very nice to beef up Frenzy if you're going to be a Frenzy Barbarian. Taunt does not work on bosses, but it does work on normal monsters and minions. And what it does is it causes them to have a huge decrease in their attack rating and their damage output. So as you can see right now at level 24, I am sitting at a negative 51% attack rating and negative 51% damage. It also has some other interesting effects, specifically on monsters that are mainly ranged. And I'd like to see if I can find some of those real quick just for examples. I need... so for instance, here we have some mages. So the mages are ranged monsters. If I use Taunt on the ranged monsters, they will walk toward me. Notice that even though they are ranged monsters, when I taunt them, they have to come into melee range and fight me. This can be extremely useful for monsters like Glomes, or any other kind of critters that are mainly ranged monsters that you kind of have to chase around. So keep Taunt in mind when you're dealing with these nuisances that just kind of like travel all over the place. As you can see here, here's a Glome, and I was able to taunt the Glome into melee range, making it a lot easier for me to deal with the Glomes. Granted, it doesn't work on some monsters, so like champions and elites, it's not going to be able to get those champions and elites nearby, but at the very least you can force the Glomes into melee range. Another thing that you have to notice here is that the Glomes are no longer firing lightning. This is an interesting side effect of Taunt, is that it forces the monsters into a melee stance, which means that if they do not have a melee ability, they become useless. Specifically for Glomes, this is absolutely great because you can stop the Glomes entirely from casting their lightning abilities as long as you have them taunted. Now, sometimes when it comes to Taunt, the monsters will revert back to their original AI even if they are underneath of the Taunt ability, and this usually has to do with hitting an obstruction. So if you taunt a monster and they hit an obstruction on their way to you, sometimes they will stop and revert to their normal AI programming. And this is unfortunate, especially for Glomes, because that means that they're going to start shooting lightning bolts again. But the only thing that you have to do to prevent them from shooting lightning bolts is to go back and taunt them again. And as you can see, it is extremely effective on the Glomes. The Glomes become relatively useless while underneath of the Taunt effect, and there is a huge number of monsters in the game that are like this. Take, for instance, the Spear Cats in Act 2. I believe there's Spear Cats in Dry Hills. Of course, those are the Whip Cats. We need the Spear Cats. Here's the Potion Cats, which are pretty much the same thing. Now notice the Potion Cats will run within melee range, but they still fire their potion. Which is, it's just something about each individual monster's AI works differently. So it doesn't always work out the way that you would like, but you still are forcing them into melee range. Even the little carrion birds that love to run away from you on a regular basis will come over and say hi. And this is absolutely great because you can force them into combat. There is an item now that was added into the game that has Taunt on it. It's the new rune word Unbending Will. And if you want to take a look at Unbending Will, I do have a video up on that already. But it has the ability to taunt on striking, essentially. So as the monster, or as you're attacking, you can get free taunts on the targets. It is actually a pretty good one for mercenaries, and I don't have it on me right now. But it's actually pretty cheap, too. And I think I can bring up the recipe in chat here. And it should appear on the chat window. Come on, bot, do your thing. Do your thing. Did I type it in wrong? Unbending will. I think I typed it in right. Bot doesn't want to do anything today. There we go. So it's Foul, Io, Ith, Eld, L, and Hell, which is a pretty cheap recipe. It does require a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Was it 6 or 5? 6 socket sword, which might be a little bit hard to come by the way. But if you want to check it out, I do have a YouTube video on that as well. Now, Taunt is not really something that you're going to be using as a main ability. Because it doesn't work on bosses and because it doesn't work on elites or champions, it's not really going to be like super duper ridiculously useful in all scenarios. But as you can clearly see with the Gloam example, it does have specific usefulness. And if you already have points in it because you're utilizing, you know, Frenzy, or maybe you have 1 point in it because you went down to Warcry or whatever it is that you're utilizing, it's useful to have it on the bar as a button that you can press occasionally, especially when you come across those packs of ranged monsters to force them into melee so you don't have to chase them all down one by one. And certain ranged monsters that don't have a melee attack are actually completely killable. Like you basically completely neuter them as characters. And with the Glomes as an example, the Glomes stop shooting lightning when you taunt them. So taunting the Glomes is one of the best defensive things that you can do to them. The only other thing that's even close is blinding them. But in my opinion, taunt definitely works better than blind, because while blind does stop the Glomes from shooting lightning, it doesn't bring them to you. Whereas the taunt not only stops them from shooting lightning, it brings them within melee range and lets you beat the crap out of them and kill them, which I feel like is arguably better than blinding them. There's really not a whole lot more to go over with this particular ability. I mean, bringing down the monster's attack rating and bringing down their damage definitely does make them a lot less of a threat. However, since it only works on trash mobs, it's not going to get as much use as you would think. The majority of the really like deadly monsters in the game are usually elites and champions. Things like extra strong, extra fast, fanaticized death lords. And since it doesn't work on the death lords, it's not really going to do you a huge benefit there. You can use it on the minions of the Death Lord. So you can use it on his minions, which will definitely help a little bit, but it's not going to help you with the boss itself. Anyway, as always, I do appreciate you guys and gals watching my videos, and join me for the next one as we go over Battle Cry.